Wonderful. Wonderful to be here. A great open mic. And now we have a wonderful feature of a compassionately passionate poet. So let me just read my little notes here. Put it in. Heather Flescher is a poet of passion who enjoys changing up styles and presentation. She has been performing for over 30 years, featured at Beast Crawl, the Sand City West End Festival, Brooklyn Wild Eye, the Pacific Grove Arts Center, the Monterey Peninsula Pride Festival, the Henry Miller Library, Curated Words, the Direct Action, Monterey Network, and Networking Out Loud. She has performed 3 separate 3-hour shows featuring original material as well as performing at many open mics. She has 2 books, One Foot on the Ground and Another Crazy Trans Woman. She wrote as well as starred in a play, Daughters of Nothing, which was produced at the Paper Wing Theater to great acclaim in 2017. A fine poet. And sometimes, when she presents, it's like, oh my God, I didn't know that. You had this, it's like powerful information. You can't just sit there and go, yeah, it's not that. The words go in, resonate, and you are moved and transformed. That's the kind of poetry we're about to hear. And I'm not sure what she's going to present, but I am so glad to have her here. And I now am going to mute me and let you, my friend, begin.
Thank you, Dan, for that introduction. Okay, this piece is called The Other Shoe. I really thought we had won. We had pushed beyond the tipping point and into the clear at last. In March 2016, the North Carolina legislature passed a bill banning transgender people from public bathrooms. The reaction was immediate and angry. They were boycotted by corporations, conventions, college sports teams, touring musicians, and other state governments. And then on May 9th, 2016, the Attorney General of the United States announced for the first time ever that discrimination against trans people would not be allowed, that we deserve better, we deserve equality, we deserve freedom, and the federal government would mobilize its resources to protect us. It seemed impossible, but there it was, as official can be, like watching history happen in front of our eyes, like inevitable progress towards the better future we were always promised. I could almost see the wheels of justice turning like the works of a giant clock. I could almost hear the bells of freedom ringing out across the land. Finally, we were welcome. We were accepted. We were suckers. And our lovely, shiny world of the future was about to be smashed to bits. Our fledgling visibility made us the ideal scapegoat for a country whose majority still didn't know who or what we were. A perfect target for the new right wing administration after they secured a right wing Supreme Court, reassuring the merchants of hate that now their values would prevail. They sparked a backlash as vast as it was sudden. And across this country, in states and counties and towns, laws and ordinances protecting trans people were shredded, and new laws sprouted up to replace them, taking away our health care, arresting doctors for treating us, stripping away our rights to employment and education, driver's licenses and housing, kidnapping trans children from their families, withholding their life-saving medication, forcing them to reverse their transition, bullying them back into hiding themselves and dying slowly every day. A wave of vicious legislation spreading across the land, hatched in the red state strongholds of reactionary fervor and growing faster and faster. A patchwork of new laws with language all sounding very similar, prepared by the same conservative think tanks and hate groups that had patiently waited for this chance to unleash their carefully crafted agenda, a united effort to eliminate every resource we need to keep living. Trans people in America now face overtly weaponized prejudice all around us, backed up by a lapdog media that repeats all the lies and propaganda. The so-called wheels of justice have become a buzzsaw, a jagged, heartless mechanism designed and directed to destroy us. History, has teeth. And I know it sounds awfully naive now, but I only wanted to live my life and coexist with others. That's all I ever wanted from my very beginning. But my beginning began in a bad place. Everyone was lying to me before I even understood their words. A seamless network of falsehoods that came at me from all sides, enfolding me from head to toe. They didn't know it was all a pack of lies because they couldn't conceive that my truth could exist. So they all tried to encourage the person they thought I was to make that person grow and be happy the way they were supposed to. And I played the game as best I could because, as far as I knew, it was the only game in town. But they played rough. Every sign that I was developing into my true self was a flaw to be suppressed, bringing a constant influx of conditioning for proper conformity. Do this, don't do that. Move this way, don't move that way. Talk this way, don't talk that way. Natural habits were punished repeatedly until artificial habits replaced them, and it was all justified by the ruling ideology. If you look like a fish and you explain you're actually a bird, you must be mistaken. If you insist, you must be delusional. If you try to fly, you must be stopped for your own good. Everybody knows fish can't live out of water. If you keep trying to flap your fins like you had wings, we'll have to cut them off. Stay in the water, even if it's toxic, even if you're drowning, even if we admit you don't seem happy there, you have to stay. It's the only game in town, and the game is rigged against you. It's impossible to win, impossible to find the place where you need to be. I knew I had to escape. If I didn't, I would die. But if I did escape, there was no guarantee I would live. If I gave up the name, the role, the position, the expectation, all the privilege, the persona, all of it, they were all lies, and the lies were strands of an elaborate woven mesh I had grown up within, that I had grown against and around until the strands were embedded all through my substance. The falsehoods were buried inside me, so deep that it was inconceivable to find any part of me they hadn't touched, bonded with, grafted themselves onto, colonized, corrupted, and ruined. And it seemed there was no source of leverage reliable enough to remove them from me. I had to reach down to my center, all the way down to the one place they couldn't get to. My true identity, the one thing so solid, so consistent, so totally authentic that I could have faith in it. I could cling to it. I could brace myself with it. I could start confronting the countless lies and I could dig them up and discard them. Ripping out those strands from my psyche was not an easy process. It's long, it's slow, and it's very painful. The wounds that it creates close themselves crookedly, leave jagged scars, and never heal completely. Found out some of the strands I was pulling on were connected to other people's beliefs and their fears. Tearing up those strands resulted in friends and family withdrawing their support, dislodging blocks in the load bearing structures I had taken for granted, with the result that large sections of my life came falling apart. I found out what my community really thought of me. I found out quite a bit more than I had wanted to know. I found out the space I inhabited, the space they had made for me, was only for the person they thought I was and not for me in any way. And so I had to leave it, with no pathway I could see, to build my own bridge in a direction I wasn't sure of, to a place that was only rumored to exist and might not even be there at all. And now I'm walking on this bridge as carefully as I can and as quickly as I dare, building it as I go from fragments and scraps from whatever I can find and whatever was left by those who came before me, building it as I go and piecing together the mismatched materials into any shape that might hold, building it as I go forward, even as it crumbles behind me. I do not want to disown my past, to deny it, to erase it, but I would be willing to destroy everything I ever came from if it meant I could reach a single, simple, safe place where I could be, truly be, and all I am could be true. Because lying is poison, silence is poison, and my life before transitioning was poison. As I grew up and gradually regained my original connection with my female identity, it became more and more difficult to play the game, to go through the motions and interact with men as a male, to relate to them and feel what they feel. And when I found myself in groups of men where they talk to each other as they do when only men are present, It reinforced the profound alienation that was my daily life experience. I was lost in a realm so far from my home, a home I had never yet seen or felt. I was in a different world where nothing made any sense. I would try to fathom why men sometimes spoke so confusingly, like the day back at my college, hanging out with Dave and Ryan and Steve when the conversation turned to the subject of women. Dave said he would never understand them, and Ryan and Steve agreed. They all believed they would never understand women. I said nothing. What was there to say? They all had female friends and acquaintances. The campus was full of women, and the library was full of books by women, magazine articles by women. There were poems by women, songs by women. There was information everywhere. If they didn't understand us, why didn't they try to find out? I sat there, knowing I was female, knowing that women had always made sense to me, pondering how bizarre it was for men to speak this way of our entire gender, as if we were some distant constellation, visible in the heavens, but only as a tiny glimmer, only the slightest sign of what was really there, even though what was really there was right in front of them. I would try to fathom why men sometimes spoke so heartlessly, like that night after a high school dance, hanging out with Matt and Shane and Luke, when the conversation turned to the subject of parties. Matt said casually that if a girl was passed out from drinking, that meant it was okay for you to do anything you wanted to her. And Shane and Luke agreed. If she wasn't into it, she wouldn't have gotten so drunk, they said. And I said nothing. I needed to say something, but how? They were speaking of a horrendous crime as if it was normal, and to them it was. How could that be okay? How could they possibly justify it? And if they had actually done it, how could they live with themselves? Who were these guys? They had always been nice to me, perceiving me as a fellow male. I had always felt safe around them, and I wanted to keep being safe. And I didn't want to know that this was what they were really like. That all the time I had been friends with them, this is what they were always really like. And I was frozen, and I didn't say anything. Even if I had the courage to try, I couldn't think of any way to communicate with someone like that. Where was the common ground? How could I explain that rape is wrong when it's so obvious? Like trying to tell someone the sky is blue when it's up there, everywhere, every day, and they still can't see it. So I sat, stranded in the middle of hostile territory, surrounded by my so called friend, and completely alone. I would try to fathom why men sometimes spoke so guardedly, like that afternoon at home from college for the summer, hanging out with my buddy Jackson, when the conversation turned to the topic of a local priest who had been arrested and charged with sexually abusing hundreds of children. By now in my life, I was an activist. I talked about structural change. I talked about holding the Catholic Church responsible for its policies at the highest levels that protected priests who molested children. Jackson kept bringing the subject back to this one who was on trial. He talked about the victims, and then, cautiously, he said to me, You know, I kind of know how they feel. And this was a very difficult moment. He might have been trying to tell me he was a sexual abuse survivor, but I didn't say anything. In the past, Jackson had always been quick to make jokes of a sexual nature on any occasion, as raunchy as he could. The more offensive, the better, as if this created some shared zone of comfort between us, some common interest. He had made jokes about pedophilia from time to time, ugly jokes that sat in my gut like lead weights, and to my shame, I did my best to ignore them. We had never had a serious discussion about child sexual abuse. I had never thought we would. I had never told him about my own survivor issues. At this point, I had shared my story with a few close friends, but I would never tell Jackson about it. I assumed from the attitude he displayed that this topic was not safe to bring up. And now, all of a sudden, it was possible that he was trying to be honest with me about something very private and painful. It was possible that he was trying to turn 180 degrees on the spot to show me what was behind the bluster and bravado, trying to slip past the strategic misdirection that camouflaged his trauma. I said nothing. Nothing personal, nothing supportive, nothing encouraging. There was too much baggage weighing us down. I didn't have the language to reach out, to get around the obstacles between us. Our past together was filled with too many of his jokes about child molesters, like wreckage littering the landscape, the jokes designed to keep the truth at bay, that still perform their function automatically, like robots, their function to deflect any serious attention, any honest exploration, to derail the exact sort of conversation we might otherwise have started right then. And I wish with all of my soul that we could have had that conversation. But I was out of my depth with no preparation, no reassurance to fall back on. And I said nothing. And he never mentioned it again. I learned there are feelings that are not supposed to exist in that realm, where the rules are established and enforced, where the ways of men's culture are passed down, replicated for each successive generation, where ignorance is required and empathy is sacrificed, where men are not permitted to be human, where the less human they are, the more they are rewarded, the more they can rise through the hierarchy, gain respect and influence. Like the conservative politician I saw on TV the other day, warning of the danger of transsexual perverts and the horrible things he says we want to do. He is an expert at delivering this message. He is filled with passion and trembling as he speaks, and he is projecting confidence and potency as he has practiced for a lifetime. But underneath it is a current of raw animal fear. He is so afraid. I can feel it. I have never done anything to him, but I can tell that other people have. He and I grew up in the same society and received the same message. Don't you dare show any signs of being feminine, or else. Boys are bombarded with these threats, which are constant and coercive and corrosive. Any softness must be buried, any sensitivity must be smothered. And this prominent politician, this intimidating authority who clawed his way up the ladder of power and holds sway over the lives of so many, was once a little boy, no doubt desperate to avoid the bullying from his peers, from his teachers, from his church, from his family, whenever he behaved in a way that was too much like a girl. At times he would cry, as human beings in pain will tend to do, and they teased him and called him a girl, and they shoved him and called him a girl, and they beat him and called him a girl. And he learned there was one way to make it through this gauntlet of condemnation and humiliation. All his girlish qualities would have to be destroyed. I received some similar lessons, and it's chilling to recall how effective they were. I tried so hard to stop identifying as female. I would have done anything. I tried again and again to kill the girl in me. I tried so hard I surely would have succeeded if it were possible, but she was too strong and she needed to live, and I finally accepted her. I finally accepted me. And this politician cannot accept people like me, this furious, vitriolic man who long ago was badgered into committing a grotesque act of psychological self mutilation, now clings to the rationale that his suffering was necessary and justified, and there is no other way to be. It is part of his essential concept of reality. If I walked in front of him, he wouldn't see me. He would see the embodiment of the terrifying elements he strove to eradicate within himself that he suspects might still be lurking in a distant corner of his psyche. I am his nightmare come back to haunt him, and more of us come out publicly each day, and so his problem crashes down on us and becomes our problem. Well, I cannot solve his problem, and he may never get past it. The damage runs so deep. But if I could, if I could go back in time and protect that boy, I would. I would save him from the relentless cruelty, the mockery, the assault. He would never have to learn to fear and hate and harm. If I could, I would protect all of them. They could be who they really are, and then everybody would get to live. But we don't live in that ideal world. Ideals are fine for inspiration, for imagining where we want to be. However, they can sweep us off our feet and carry us away if we let them. Like the announcement by the US Attorney General in 2016, I really thought we had won. I thought the glorious slogans of liberty and justice for all were finally manifesting. I didn't foresee how much hatred our enemies could tap into. I didn't predict that trans folks would have to step up in this emergency, stockpiling hormones, studying self defense and buying weapons, updating our passports while we still can, keeping a bag packed with the essentials. I didn't expect that trans folks would be forced to flee their states or even abandon their country of birth. leaving behind jobs and schools and homes in search of essential safety. I didn't know we would need to join together like never before, strengthening our bonds of community to withstand a worst case scenario, reaching out emphatically to friends and loved ones and allies in the name of our basic survival. I didn't imagine the other shoe was about to drop. I didn't realize the war was just starting. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Unmute, ladies and gentlemen. Just let her hear.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Heather.
You, Heather.
Amazing.
Wow.
That was powerful.
Yes,
Important.
it is. Very powerful.
And
So
thank you
much
for giving,
truth. Thank you, Heather.
thank you for giving me the opportunity to share that.
God bless you, Heather. Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed the latter portion when you just made all those wishes. That for me, that was like, yeah, it's like I really was just, nodding to that. That's great. That's great. As people who have had difficulties in their lives, we wish that we could do exactly that. Go back in time and take care of it and prevent anything from ever happening to anyone. So, children are beautiful and they need to be protected and kept protected.